I'd like you to think of twin girls who pretty much look the same, but inwardly could not be more different. They are outwardly alike, but on the inside, where it really counts, they are worlds apart. And that cannot be emphasized enough. The difference has to do with what's going on in each of them. The girls are from the same family. They've had the same background, socially and educationally, but internally, one leans in one direction, one in another. It's a mystery, perplexing for parents, that given the same circumstances and opportunities, how is it that one of my children goes off in that direction and another chooses an entirely different path? One goes from strength to strength, another, as it seems, from pit to pit. Well, one possible way of relating to this mystery is to say that choices are being made. After all is said and done, choices are being made, resulting in certain attitudes. Each child, indeed each of us, is continually forming an attitude. For some, over time, an attitude of openness is being cultivated. It's become our habit continually to choose, regardless of what we come up against, that we will find a way to learn, to grow, and if possible, like to forgive. We're determined to follow our highest and best impulses as a way of life. And then there's the attitude of someone who continues to choose to be bitter for some reason. She nurses grievances. She hasn't forgotten how she was slighted, ignored, or wounded. Hell hath no fury, as the saying goes, like a woman scorned. Well, I got the idea a while back that when presented with a great work of art, say, for example, the writings of Shakespeare or the music of Bach, that if I show no interest or can't relate or don't understand or try to get away from it, that my unresponsiveness is a revelation of a lack in me. I determined then that my attitude should be that upon learning of such a lack, that I could do something about it. I could educate myself to be able to respond to the masterpiece of literature or of music appropriately and properly, and not to be the sort of person who gets twitchy and nervous and whose eyes glaze over in response to Mozart. I've not wanted to be like some ignorant, uncomprehending fellow who has perhaps gotten into the habit of a few too many hours in his man cave, entertained and stupefied by the world of shadows and appearances presented on the giant television screen. I'd like to be known not as an entertained man, but as an educated one. And as such, therefore, my task is to cultivate an attitude of openness and reverence towards high ideals and standards, always ready to learn and to grow. So what I think I know and understand is nothing compared to what could be known and understood. Now, it happens that the twin sisters I've mentioned are princesses. The story of their differing attitudes and colliding visions was told by Owen Barfield in his book, The Silver Trumpet. C.S. Lewis called Barfield the best and wisest of my unofficial teachers. So this Barfield told a story which was read by J.R.R. Tolkien, and his children were so inspired by it that they begged their father to write such a story for them. And in response, Tolkien wrote The Hobbit. Well, Barfield's book is a fairy tale about a knight named Prince Courtesy and his silver trumpet, which has differing effects on people whenever it's blown. Thus, the sisters hear the trumpet sound, but they exhibit entirely different responses to it. Now, the name of one princess, her name is Violetta. She cares about, listen to the things she cares about. She cares about music, dance, traditions, mothering, and courtliness. That last word indicating a concern to be dignified, polite, and elegant, suitable for the court of a king. You get the picture here of an impressive class act. Indeed, she's a magnificent soul. Gambetta, her sister, tends to be in contrast unimaginative and quite humorless. She likes a book about black magic, but has no desire to change or work on herself at all. It's society, Gambetta rages, that has to change. Thus, her vision is to organize an insurgency, and she becomes a member of a rebel society known as the Amalgamated Princesses, the title of which says it all. Well, these former princesses have come together to support in each of them that attitude of defiance that had got them banished from their various domains. They didn't like the behavioral standards for princesses and so had broken the rules. What they shared in common? A contempt for tradition, and they disdained courtliness. They were now therefore fallen princesses. Well, in such a condition, these are not impressive babes. Hey, but in contrast, Violetta does impress. Why? Well, hers is an open spirit. She's open to dream and to imagine. And when that magic trumpet plays, her whole being responds. The result is a magnificence of soul. And I think our world needs more awakened souls, more magnificent souls. Let's play with this word soul for a minute here. I'd like to share with you that James Hillman, the psychologist, called soul the imaginative possibility of our nature. Like soul is something we're capable of. We're not, however, born with soul. Soul's not an already formed entity or substance within us. Soul is created when the imagination is ignited. Soul forms when we allow ourselves to dream dreams and to see visions. Thus, soul is the imagination ignited and fired up. What I'd like to say about soul here is that its creation is a higher attainment than to be in that state of equilibrium, sometimes known as peace of soul. Like, I'm all for peace of soul, would like more of it, but understand that there's something higher than mere peace of soul, just as there's something higher than merely being happy or merely being content. What's higher is the biblical idea of an experience one has with all of one's being, with all of one's soul and all of one's might, regardless of how mortifying or discordant or even pathological such an experience can be at times. Thus, it strikes me in this regard that you can be someone who has been in your life terribly wounded. You can be someone who continues to be haunted and disturbed in this way or that, and yet remain and be a magnificent soul. That is, someone possessed by a high purpose and determination. You don't have to have worked everything out. You can be, for instance, a wounded healer, able to heal the pain in others because of what you've gone through and which you may still feel sometimes. The lie I think that we're up against today in all kinds of forms is that suggestion that you're supposed to get to the point in your life where everything is all right, that you've worked it all out. Well, James Hillman calls this assumption of having worked it all out or having it all together. He calls this a fantasy. And what usually accompanies the fantasy is the idea that we need to be processing things sufficiently. If ever there was a tired word, it's that word process. It's thought that we need to process so well that we're going to level things out so completely that we don't have strong, disturbing emotions and events, like a zombie state. You know, the poet Rilke protested that he did not wish to be leveled out and smoothed out in this way. I don't want, he said, the demons taken away because they're going to take away my angels too. Well, so why is that? Why? Simply because wounds and scars are the stuff of character, just as in the case of St. Paul, whose thorn in the flesh remained, whatever that was, in spite of all of his prayers. Paul came to understand that the development of a Christ-like character depended less upon demonstrations of impressive strength and success, and more upon the acceptance of weaknesses and limitation. So all of Paul's prayers to be rid of the disability made no difference. The thorn remained, just as the scars may remain for any of us. And no amount of processing is going to get rid of the wounds. And it may be anyway that even after months or even years of processing, that only a processed psyche will result, like processed food. You become, after all the therapy and all of the expense, by the way, like nice, thin slices of yellow cheese. You become packaged and labeled, sprouting forth formulas and cliches with a goony smile on your face. Evidence, surely, that the soul has been knocked right out of you. Well, I think the challenge in life is not so much to become some kind of skilled processor, but an inspired creator, a person with an inspired imagination. The breakthrough is to imagine a why so that you can bear any how. This is what Viktor Frankl talked about, to imagine a great why so that you can bear any how. It's to find a purpose or meaning in your life far greater than yourself. It's to find something or someone that you can live for and give yourself to. So Hillman asks great questions. For example, he asks, well, what did great men do with the pain in their lives? I mean, what did, for example, Jonathan Swift do? Well, he wrote the most incredible satires. And then he goes on with his questions, like asking rhetorically, well, what did James Joyce do with his feelings about Ireland? And what did Faulkner do with his feelings about the South? Well, each of these men ignited their imaginations by creating great works of art. So I think, like them in our own way, we need to become artists or creators, like in some way or another. It's therefore a creative endeavor of some kind that will save us from meaninglessness and despair. Turn to the imagination, Hillman implores, to work with things. Turn to the imagination. And then Hillman also says, this is the motivation why we should be exposing ourselves to, like, the biographies of artists, because biographies show what they did with their traumas. They show what can be done by the imagination with hatred, with bitterness, with feelings of being useless and inferior and worthless. You can see what difference the imagination can make. So what's needed is for the imagination to be ignited, like turn it on. We need to enter the realm of imaginative possibilities. Well, feast on this for a moment. To imagine is to reenact the creation of the world through your own particular creative endeavor, whatever that might be. And it was Coleridge, like, keep feasting. I love this. It was Coleridge who said that the imagination acts as a repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation. The imagination acts as a repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation. Like, find that in your life and, like, take off. So, bottom line, you don't so much need therapy. Well, maybe for a little while. Okay, but like, it's not the answer. What is most deeply needed is a reason to live, a reason to be, a dream to fulfill, a task to complete. What are you here for? What are you born for? Surely for something that demands your soul, your all. To love with all of one's soul and strength, like with one's entire being. The result, when one is on fire in that kind of way, the imagination lit up and on fire, the result, a soul of magnificence.